LiveCycle 101. Today I want to talk about static form conversion. What do I mean by that? Well, let's look at some common forms. I'm just going to type in common medical forms. I'm going to go to images. Let's just see what we can find here. Let's look at this one. So if you look around for medical forms, and whether they be PDF or any other Word or whatever, you'll see a common theme in all of them, and that is that they're developed and they are constructed in a very static way. So notice on this form right here, you have patient name and date of birth, and you have these underlines. Person requesting records and relationships, you have this underline. And that just screams to me, having done forms for many years, it just screams static. There's a place for somebody to actually take a pen and write out the information. Then you have this like limitations on information. You have these two underlines here. And what the form designer is basically doing is he's saying, I'm only going to give you this much space to write. And if you want to go any farther, you can't, because that's the limitation of the form. And so that's very static. It doesn't comport itself to the needs of the end user. And that's the problem with static forms. That's the problem with handwritten forms. And that's the beauty of dynamic forms. Dynamic forms are made to grow and expand in areas that the end user needs it, like this limitations of information. You could type all day and just push things down. Now, of course, what happens though with LiveCycle is people take forms like this and convert them into LiveCycle, and they build them as if LiveCycle is static. In other words, they basically create a text field like the one in that form, and they put limitations of information or whatever it is, and they create a allow multiple lines, and they give it about that much room, and they don't make, because they don't understand form flow, they don't make the form flowed, and so then they put the next line of information, as in this picture, which would be name or something like that. Then make it underlined and make this underlined, and start typing, we start making it, and it's not dynamic. It looks just like the picture, but it's not dynamic. It doesn't grow. And so I want to talk today about form conversion, converting forms that are static, converting them into Adobe LiveCycle into dynamic forms, and making them more usable. And I know most of you, that's what you're using LiveCycle for. You have something like this medical release form, and you want to turn it into something dynamic, but you don't know exactly where to match what you see here and what to change. And so just real quick, I can almost tell you, patient name is probably fine. Nobody's name is going to be bigger than that. Date of birth is probably fine, because a date is a constrained piece of information. It's not much bigger than that. Phone numbers are constrained. All this text here is fine. But then you get into this HIV/AIDS section right here where it has a I do, I do not. That's probably just a checkbox, an X checkbox. And then you have initials, date. Here, this limitations on information, that's the thing that might need to expand. And then name, street, city, state, zip, that all looks good. This one here, that probably needs to expand. And then you have a signature at the bottom. And so this form could easily be converted to dynamic, because there's really only two fields that need to be made dynamic. Everything else can be just one-liners. Like in our form, what I did here is I just made this a one-liner. I didn't say allow multiple lines, and I didn't say expand to fit, because nobody's name is going to be that long. So when we're converting forms like this, we need to take into account what dynamic elements do we need to add in, and what things can stay the same. A lot of times a requirement that a stakeholder will put on a forms developer is, hey, I want it to look as much as I can like this one. Alright, so let me download this picture thing, but I'm going to go ahead and just create this form from scratch in LiveCycle. And that's another thing I get asked about, by the way, is people have a Word template form and they want to just import it right into LiveCycle, and they say, is there any way to just quickly import it? And no, there isn't. Yes, there is a way to do a file import, but it's just so much work you have to clean up. The import engine just doesn't do a good job. So it's better to start from scratch. So you can just sit back and watch now as I'm going to create this whole medical form in LiveCycle, changing the static elements to dynamic elements. And also in YouTube video replay, you can speed up the replay to say 1.5 times, so you don't get too bored, and then slow it down. But I'm not going to talk much as I'm making it, and I'll talk at the end when I'm done, explain what I've done in this form. Hi, it's Nathan. Okay, I think we're done. So we have the medical form now built, and let's do a preview PDF. all this works like it's supposed to. Alright, so we have some problems here. We have, this is not expanding right here, this limitations on information, that is, and then the do and do nots are not exclusive because they're check fields. So we need to come here and we need to convert these into radio buttons. I just highlighted them and I just chose under the Object tab radio button. And then over here on the hierarchy I need to drag them into the same radio button list. And we'll rename the radio button list RBL do not, like that. And you see this invalid radio button group. This is just saying that since I drug those two together, that their values are the same. We just turn off specify item values under the binding tab and that goes away. And I want to do the same for these two fields. They're the same kind of thing, the do not. And then it looks like my zip code didn't flow correctly, so I need to make that a little smaller so that it stays up on this page. And I need to come here and make sure that's allow multiple lines. Expand to fit wasn't checked. So that created the issue. Alright, let's retry now. Now those are exclusive, one or the other. And these are exclusive. But there's a problem. They're out of order now, so I have to go fix that. But let's check this first. Can I expand to fit? Yes, I can. Good. Alright, we didn't check the date here. Alright, good. So one more change. I need to reorganize these. And you've probably noticed that radio buttons, moving them around in a flowed subform is a little squirrely. You just have to play with it. Okay, looks good. So I hope that's a good example of how to take a static form and convert it into a dynamic form. Some of the elements here that are still static are this HIV section where I had to basically create my narrative portion in two different text boxes in order not to crowd out the do and do not areas of the form. And I put all that inside of a position subform so that when the whole form was set to float, everything didn't go to pot like that. I don't want that, so I want all that set in a position subform. There's nothing in here that needs to flow, but this subform will move up and down depending on the size of the objects around it. So hopefully that's a good example of a static form being made into a dynamic form and the advantages of doing so. And in future videos we'll talk more about the details of this project.